The most expensive subscription in your life might be completely free. No monthly charge, no contract, no cancellation fee, just a group chat. Because the wrong friends rarely cost you money by asking for it. They cost you money by making expensive behavior feel normal. Another night out feels normal. Sleeping until noon feels normal. Staying in the same dead job for 4 years feels normal. Spending your entire paycheck feels normal. Making fun of somebody who takes their future seriously feels normal, and eventually being broke feels normal too. That is a much bigger problem than one friend borrowing $50. Because $50 disappears once, a low-ambition environment can quietly change 10 years of decisions. And I know this because I've lived in both rooms. This is a faceless channel, but there is obviously a real person behind these videos. I've made some money. I've driven some extremely expensive cars. I've experienced things that, realistically, are outside a normal middle-class life. And I had advantages. My parents were a huge one. I went to private school. So pretty early, I knew what wealth looked like. I had seen expensive houses, cars, businesses, people who could buy something without first opening their banking app and staring at it for 30 seconds. But knowing what rich looks like and knowing how to create it yourself are two completely different things. When high school ended, I didn't get into college. My parents were living far away. And suddenly I was on my own. Nobody cared what school I had gone to. Nobody cared what kind of people I had grown up around. I needed to work. So I started working. And through work, I accidentally ended up around people with serious money. Business owners, people running companies, people buying things I couldn't afford, people whose normal Tuesday involved numbers that would have terrified me at the time. And because I'm naturally curious, I talked to them. A lot. Some became friends. One person introduced me to another, then another, and over time I built this strange network around myself of people who were doing very well financially. But at the exact same time, I had another group. Friends who wanted to party constantly, drink constantly, stay out until stupid hours, do things that are funny for about 6 months, and then start quietly becoming your personality. There was a period where waking up on time for school or work felt like an achievement. Same me. Two completely different environments. And what shocked me wasn't that the richer people had better cars. That part was obvious. It was what each group made me feel embarrassed about. Around one group, working too much was embarrassing. You were trying too hard. You were boring. You took things too seriously. Around the other group, wasting an entire day was embarrassing. Not because anyone gave me a motivational speech. Nobody sat me down and said, "You need to maximize your potential." They were just busy. Something was happening. Calls, problems, projects, deals, flights, meetings. Someone was always going somewhere. And after enough time around that, spending Tuesday doing absolutely nothing started to feel expensive. That is when I understood something. Your friends don't need to tell you what to do. They just need to control what feels normal. And normal is incredibly powerful. Imagine your closest 5 friends all make roughly $35,000 a year. Nobody is learning anything new. Nobody negotiates salary. Nobody changes jobs unless they get fired. Nobody talks about ownership. Nobody knows anyone running a business. Every Friday, the conversation is basically the same. Boss is an idiot. Company is terrible. Pay is terrible. Anyway, same time next week? After a few years, 35,000 doesn't feel low. It feels like life. Now put the exact same person around 5 people doing completely different things. One just moved companies for a 40% raise. One is buying into a small business. One is learning something because their industry pays twice as much for it. One is negotiating equity. One just walked away from a job because another company offered more. Nobody even needs to give you advice. You start asking different questions automatically. Wait, you can negotiate that? Wait, they paid you how much? Wait, you left without another job. Wait, what does that company do? Wait, how did you meet that person? Your income can change because your questions changed. and your questions changed because the room changed. This is why the wrong social circle is so expensive. It removes questions before you ever think to ask them. You don't know you're underpaid because everyone you know is underpaid. You don't know your industry has a ceiling because everyone you know works in the same industry. You don't know people negotiate these things because nobody around you negotiates anything except whose turn it is to pay for another round. That is a serious disadvantage. And it gets worse. Because low ambition doesn't just sit there quietly. Groups protect themselves. Watch what happens when one person starts moving. You get a better job. Look at this corporate guy now. You stop going out every weekend. You've changed. You start taking something seriously. Bro thinks he's going to be a millionaire. You start making videos. They send the first one into the group chat. You start a business. Suddenly everybody becomes an economic analyst. That market's saturated. Interesting. You've been unemployed for 6 months, but thank you for the market research. This is one of the strangest things about trying to change. People who never take risks can become incredibly confident explaining why yours won't work. And usually it comes disguised as humor. That matters, because direct criticism is easy to reject. A joke gets inside. You start thinking about how stupid you'll look if it fails. You imagine the group chat. You imagine explaining yourself, so maybe you don't post it. Maybe you don't apply. Maybe you don't tell anyone. Then maybe you stop doing it completely. And nothing dramatic happened. Nobody sabotaged you. They laughed. You adjusted. That can cost you years. There is also a much more obvious cost. Money. Friend groups have their own economy, and once you join one, you start paying the local tax. Some groups eat out constantly. Some groups drink. Some groups travel. Some groups need the newest clothes. Some groups upgrade cars the second the current one stops impressing anyone. Some groups have somehow turned birthdays into 3-day international conferences. And if you want to stay included, you pay. One dinner is nothing. One night is nothing. One weekend is nothing. But lifestyles aren't built out of one night. They're built out of repeated permission. 70 here, 100 there, taxi home. Food the next morning because nobody is cooking after getting home at 4. Random purchase because everybody else bought one. Trip you didn't really want to take. Suddenly you're spending hundreds every month maintaining membership in a social life you're not even sure you enjoy. But even that is still not the most expensive part. The worst part happens the next morning, because money can be earned again. Time cannot. Say every Friday night destroys half of Saturday. Not the whole day. Just half. You're alive, technically. But you're useless until 2. 52 Saturdays, half a day each. That is 26 full days every year. Almost a month. And we're only talking Saturday mornings. Add late Sundays, random Thursdays, the Monday where you're somehow still recovering from Saturday because apparently your body has filed a complaint. Now, we are not discussing nightlife anymore. We are discussing months of usable life. Imagine someone gave you an extra month every year. Not to work 18 hours a day. Just one extra month where your brain works. What could happen? You could become better at your actual job. Change jobs. Study for something. Build something. Meet different people. Travel somewhere useful. Make 50 terrible attempts at something until one works. Or do absolutely nothing sometimes. That is allowed too. But at least you chose it. The expensive version is losing the time automatically because Friday decided Saturday for you. And there is another cost that is almost impossible to calculate. Reputation, people talk, not in some evil conspiracy. Normal human beings recommend people they trust. Imagine someone needs a person for a serious opportunity. Good money. Real responsibility. They ask someone you both know, "What about Daniel?" And the answer is, "Daniel's funny. I like him. But I don't know if I'd trust him with that." Conversation over. You will never know what happened. There is no rejection email. Nobody tells you that you almost got the opportunity. You just never received the phone call. That might be the most brutal financial cost of all. The opportunities you lose without knowing they existed. And your friends can influence this more than you think. If you are constantly late because your circle is constantly late, People notice. If every weekend leaves you unreliable, people notice. If your friends create drama everywhere they go, your name starts traveling with the group. If your entire identity becomes partying, joking, and never taking anything seriously, people may enjoy having you around. That does not mean they trust you, and trust is where a huge amount of money moves. Nobody gives the interesting project to the person they think might disappear. Nobody recommends the person who can't answer their phone before noon. Nobody brings somebody into a serious room if they're worried they'll act like an idiot. You can be socially popular and economically invisible at the same time. That is a nasty combination. The opposite happens too. Spend enough time around people who are building things and your reputation starts moving differently. Somebody says your name. Oh yeah, he's good. He shows up. He knows this. She's working on that. You should talk to her. That sentence, you should talk to them, can be worth more than months of applying online. And this is where my own network became valuable. It wasn't that rich people started handing me money. That would have been convenient. What they handed me was context. I heard conversations I wouldn't have heard otherwise. I learned what people paid for things. I learned how wealthy people thought about time. I learned how quickly some decisions were made. I learned that people I assumed were somehow operating with perfect information were often just making a decision and dealing with what happened next. I learned how much of business was simply one person knowing another person. That was huge. Because from the outside, wealth can look like a locked building. You assume everybody inside knows some secret, then you get inside the room. And a surprising amount of it is just people calling each other. Do you know someone who can do this? Yes. Done. That's opportunity. And if everyone around you knows the same 10 people, works the same jobs, goes to the same places, and has the same conversations, your world becomes incredibly small. Not bad. Small. That distinction matters. Your friends can be fantastic people and still have a tiny world. And if you borrow their world, you inherit its ceiling. This is why I don't think the solution is simply get richer friends. That advice is stupid. A wealthy person can be completely useless for your growth. Maybe they inherited everything. Maybe they're lazy. Maybe they're boring. Maybe they're deeply committed to becoming the first human to spend $300,000 a year doing absolutely nothing interesting. Money is not the trait. Ambition is not even exactly the trait. Movement is. You want people who are moving. Someone earning $28,000 who is learning, applying, experimenting, and improving can be far better for you than someone earning $200,000 who hasn't challenged themselves in 10 years. Because the first person creates energy. They bring new information into the room. I applied for this. I found this. I talked to this person. I tried this. It failed. I'm doing something different. Now the group has new material. Contrast that with the dead group. Same bar, same table, same complaints, same 5 stories from 2022. Somebody mentions an idea. Everyone explains why it won't work. Next round. You can lose years in that room because nothing feels urgent. That is another massive cost. Urgency. When everybody around you is stationary, you feel like you have time. Loads of time. You're 21. Relax. 22. Still young. 23. Who cares? 24. Plenty of time. 25. Then something strange starts happening. People you barely noticed begin separating. Someone has 5 years of experience in a valuable field. Someone has a serious professional network. Someone owns something. Someone has a business that finally stopped being terrible. Someone has spent 5 years making mistakes in public and now actually knows what they're doing. And suddenly you realize something very uncomfortable. 5 years passed for both of you. They used theirs. You consumed yours. That comparison hurts because it exposes the real bill. Compounding doesn't only happen to money. Skills compound. Relationships compound. Reputation compounds. Confidence compounds. Knowledge compounds. If someone starts at 21 and gets slightly more capable every year, at 26 they are not 5% ahead of you. They may be operating in a completely different world. Their friends are different. Their opportunities are different. Their salary is different. Their conversations are different. Now they meet somebody through work who opens another door. That door leads to another. Opportunity compounds too. This is why early social circles matter so much. They influence whether compounding ever starts. And then there is the most dangerous friend of all. Not the lazy friend. The comfortable friend. The person who has built a philosophy around never trying. Everything is stupid. Careers are stupid. Businesses are scams. Rich people are evil. Investing is gambling. Trying hard is cringe. People with goals are compensating for something. Success is mostly luck. Failure proves the system is rigged. Notice how convenient this worldview is. It requires absolutely nothing from the person holding it. If the world is completely fixed, they never have to test themselves. And if you start succeeding, that becomes a problem. Because now there is evidence standing in front of them. So your success has to be explained away. You got lucky. Your parents helped. You knew someone. That won't last. Sometimes those things are even partly true. I had advantages. Pretending otherwise would be ridiculous. But an advantage can explain part of a result without explaining every decision after it. This is where people get trapped. They find one reason someone else had an easier path and use it as permission to do nothing with theirs. Very comfortable, very expensive. And there is another version of this that sounds much nicer. I just want to enjoy life. Good. So do I. But be careful. Because enjoy life can become the nicest phrase ever invented for avoiding anything difficult. Don't work too much. Enjoy life. Don't save too aggressively. Enjoy life. Don't skip this trip. Enjoy life. Don't take that opportunity if it sounds stressful. Enjoy life. Then 10 years later, you're stressed because you never built anything that gave you options. Not very enjoyable. Fun is not the enemy. Some of my best memories came from doing completely irresponsible things with friends. I'm not interested in becoming the guy who tells 20-year-olds to sit at home Friday night reading annual reports. That sounds horrific. The issue is proportion. Is the fun inside your life? Or is your life organized around recovering from fun? Huge difference. One gives you memories, the other gives you a pattern. And patterns become identity. That's why I think one of the best tests for a friendship is incredibly simple. After spending time with this person, what do I usually become? Not how do I feel during the conversation. That's too easy. What happens after? Do I leave wanting to move? Do I think bigger? Do I hear something new? Do I become curious? Do I make better decisions? Or do I spend more? Drink more? Complain more? Delay more? Make excuses? Wake up the next day slightly worse than I was before? One night means nothing. A year means something, because friendships are repetition. That is what gives them power. And no, the answer is not to suddenly delete everyone from your phone and announce that you are protecting your energy. Please don't become that person. You do not need to conduct layoffs in your friendship department. You can keep people you love. You can party sometimes. You can have friends who don't care about money. You can have friends who want completely different lives. The problem is not friendship. The problem is dependence on one environment. If every close person around you thinks the same way, earns roughly the same way, spends the same way, socializes the same way, and wants roughly the same future, then you have no contrast. You need contrast. That was the advantage I accidentally got. I could spend time with one group and see what one trajectory looked like, then spend time around the other group and see another. The difference became impossible to ignore. You can create that contrast deliberately, and it doesn't require sneaking into some millionaire dinner. Go where ambitious people naturally concentrate. Work, professional communities, a serious sports club, industry events, classes, projects, places where somebody has to care enough to repeatedly show up. Then talk to people. Not network. I hate that word. Talk. Ask what they do. Ask how they got into it. Ask what surprised them. Ask what they would do differently. If someone clearly knows something you don't, become curious instead of trying to impress them. That alone will make you more interesting than half the people they meet. Because people with serious experience constantly meet young people who want the result. Very few want to understand the process. And one conversation can change your map. Maybe they mention a job you didn't know existed, a company, a city, a skill, a person, a mistake. You leave knowing one more thing than you knew when you walked in. Do that for 5 years, and your world gets enormous. And once your world gets bigger, one final thing changes, your standards. This is where the financial effect becomes brutal. Because standards determine what you tolerate. You tolerate being underpaid until you see someone similar earning more. You tolerate terrible management until you see a company run properly. You tolerate having no savings until everybody around you has some. You tolerate being permanently exhausted until you meet people who take their health seriously. You tolerate spending every weekend drunk until you meet someone who has a life they genuinely prefer being awake for. That last one is important. The goal isn't to become a machine. The goal is to build a life that doesn't require constant escape. And the people around you are either helping build that standard or slowly lowering it. That is why the wrong friends can cost you an extraordinary amount of money without ever touching your wallet. They can cost you the job you never applied for, the person you never met, the morning you lost, the reputation you never built, the salary you never negotiated, the idea you stopped talking about because everybody laughed, the 5 years you thought didn't matter because everyone around you was wasting theirs too. There is no receipt for any of this. That's what makes the cost so easy to ignore. Then one day, you meet someone your age living a completely different life. And suddenly you can see the alternate timeline. That is the bill. So don't ask whether your friends are rich. That's shallow and mostly useless. Ask whether they are moving. Ask whether they are curious. Ask whether they take responsibility. Ask whether they have something they care enough about to sacrifice for. Ask whether your success would make them proud or uncomfortable. And most importantly, look at yourself after you spend time with them. Because your social circle does something much more powerful than giving advice. It gives you a definition of normal. Choose that definition very carefully. I had one group that made missing mornings feel normal, and another that made wasting them feel expensive. Same person, same 24 hours, different room. Over one weekend, the difference was almost nothing. Over years, it changed everything.